They called Earth primitive because it had no crown, no planetary anthem, no single flag large enough to be seen from orbit. They called it weak because its nations argued over maps while storms tore across its oceans and hunger still haunted its cities. They called it harmless because its ships had barely touched its own moon, and because its weapons were noisy, chemical, crude things made by creatures who still buried their dead in soil. Then the Vaer Dominion landed there, and the oldest mistake in the galaxy was made again. They confused disunity with surrender. The Dominion had conquered worlds so efficiently that conquest had become ceremony. Its fleets arrived in silence, dark as polished bone, and its victims usually understood the lesson before the first weapon fired. Their soldiers wore armor grown from living metal. Their siege walkers could step through mountains. Their orbital lances had opened moons. To the Vaer, less advanced worlds were unfinished rooms waiting for an architect. Earth was marked as a Class 4 garden planet. Rich. Fractured. Volatile. Disorganized. Its archives showed wars, songs, elections, famines, satellites, missiles, poetry, oceans of argument, and machines repaired with tape, luck, and profanity. The final recommendation was clean and confident. Annexation within 6 days. Grand Marshal Othran Vel believed the estimate generous. From the observation deck of the flagship Sovereign Glass, he watched Earth turn beneath him, blue and white and unaware of how fragile it looked. Its night side glittered with cities, each one a separate nerve in a body that did not know it was one body yet. The first message went out in every human language the Dominion could decode. Earth would transfer all defense authority to Vaer Command. Earth would surrender all orbital systems. Earth would submit to administrative protection. Compliance would preserve population centers. Resistance would invite correction. Humanity answered in 1,000 voices. The first landing fell before dawn on a coastal military base already shattered by precision strikes. Black carriers sank through cloud, their engines turning sand to glass. Thousands of Vaer troops stepped onto Earth in perfect rows. Drones opened like steel insects above them. Siege walkers unfolded in the smoke, taller than cathedrals, patient as executioners. No resistance was expected. The ground blew open beneath the first column. Buried explosives, old fuel lines, hidden charges, and traps wired by hands that had no business surviving orbital fire tore through the landing zone. A siege walker lost 2 legs and crashed sideways into the beach. Crude human rifles opened from ruined buildings. Rockets streaked from drainage tunnels. A farmer on a hill shot a drone through its eye with a weapon made for hunting deer. A wounded pilot drove a burning truck into a carrier ramp and vanished in a bloom of white fire. The Vaer armor held against most of it. Most was not all. Othran received the report with irritation, not concern. Primitive worlds often mistook courage for strategy. He ordered the second wave. The second wave landed near capitals, ports, data hubs, and power stations. Dominion doctrine was simple. Seize the command nodes and the species would fold. Every civilized world had a spine. Break it, and the limbs fell still. Earth had no spine. Earth had billions of nerves. By the second day, the Dominion had captured 9 cities and controlled none. Their soldiers held airports without fuel, ports without cranes, towers that broadcast only static, and government buildings whose files had been moved to basements, temples, schools, ships, and kitchens. Their doctrine divided populations into combatants and civilians. Earth refused the division. The nurse who treated an invader also stole medical polymer for resistance chemists. The child selling fruit counted patrols. The barber listened to occupation officers complain, then passed their words through a mirror wired as a transmitter. The grandmother offering soup marked armor seams with flour on her fingertips. The Vaer had studied human weapons. They had not studied human stubbornness. Othran began reading captured history. It was an ugly archive. Wars everywhere. Betrayals everywhere. Empires rising on bones, then rotting into lessons no one obeyed for long. A species brilliant enough to split the atom and foolish enough to threaten itself with the pieces. At first, it comforted him. Earth was not a civilization. It was a wound that had learned language. Then he read further. Humans had survived ice without fur, predators without claws, plagues without understanding, grief without cure, and darkness without certainty. They crossed seas before knowing what waited beyond them. They climbed mountains because someone said they could not. They turned poisons into medicine, lightning into industry, and mourning into law. They made music in trenches. They planted gardens in ruins. They told jokes at funerals because even sorrow, on earth, was expected to make room. Primitive, the report had said. Othran began to wonder whether primitive meant close to the first truth of life. Bleed, learn, rise. Lose the fire, build another. Bury your dead, then guard the ground. On the third day, the Dominion attempted a lesson from orbit. Sovereign Glass aimed its main lance at an uninhabited island range. The mountain would be cut in half on every channel humanity could still watch. Earth would see that even landscapes existed by Vaer permission. The lance fired. It struck a mirror. Not a weapon in any Vaer sense. A web of solar reflectors, weather shields, museum satellites, mining lenses, and metallic debris had been moved into position by operators from a dozen nations who had never trusted one another until trust became less useful than survival. The beam scattered. Most burned away into space. Some splashed back across the flagship hull, shaking the observation deck and throwing officers from their stations. Across Earth, people watched the invader hit itself. Fear did not vanish, but it changed flavor. By the fourth day, the war was everywhere. In the Andes, a patrol vanished into fog. In Siberia, engineers drowned a landing field by redirecting a river through frozen trenches. In Lagos, a fake surrender trapped 2 occupation units beneath a stadium. In Cairo, historians opened old passages into newer sewers and turned the city into a throat that swallowed patrols. In Mumbai, coders fed drone pathfinders so much traffic footage that the machines chose paralysis over movement. In the Australian interior, trackers followed Vaer scouts for days, not to kill them quickly, but to learn how long their suits could thirst. The Dominion still won battles. Its weapons were monstrous. Cities burned. Satellites fell like false stars. Roads filled with families carrying medicine, water, memory cards, heirlooms, and ashes in sealed jars. Earth suffered beyond measure. Yet the Vaer could not find the point where suffering became obedience. They silenced broadcasters and found children with radios. They jammed satellites and found balloons. They destroyed balloons and found kites. They burned towers and found bells, drums, couriers, flashing lamps, coded laundry, and songs whose third verse told a neighborhood when to run. Othran ordered the capture of the Emergency Coalition Chamber in Geneva. The symbolism pleased him. Humanity still believed in rooms, flags, polished tables, and speeches. Seize the room, broadcast submission from its heart, and the fever would break. The assault force descended through snow. The chamber was empty. Not abandoned. Prepared. Every seat held an object. A child's shoe. A pilot's helmet. A burned passport. A wedding ring. A cracked phone. A seed packet. A school badge. A spoon from a refugee camp. A violin bow. A miner's lamp. A blood-stained scarf. A broken toy spaceship. At the center stood a screen connected to a generator. When the Vaer entered, it played faces from every region of Earth. Farmers, astronauts, nurses, monks, prisoners, presidents, street cleaners, soldiers, singers, scientists, and children appeared one after another. No single leader spoke for humanity, which was precisely the point. The message was simple enough for every translator to understand. A life owned by another was not peace. A planet kept as property was not alive. The screen ended with Earth seen from deep space, small and blue in the dark. Beneath it were 3 words in thousands of scripts. Still our home. The Vaer commander ordered the screen destroyed. The floor opened instead. The chamber became the mouth of a trap built overnight by engineers who had once designed train systems, flood barriers, concert stages, and alpine tunnels. The invaders fell into darkness. The ceiling sealed above them. Speakers poured human languages from every side to blind their sonic maps. Then came the water, freezing and fast, diverted from the lake by infrastructure the Dominion had catalogued as civilian and irrelevant. By dawn, the empty chamber was known across the planet. Embarrassment entered the Dominion fleet. Then anger. Othran authorized punitive strikes. Vaer weapons carved fire through districts whose names would later become prayers. Humanity answered without innocence. The war moved into alleys, forests, fields, ports, rooftops, and data centers. Earth taught the invader that no machine removes the old terror of being hunted by someone who knows the land better than you know your own breath. On the 6th day, the Marshal chose punishment over conquest. If humans would not submit, they would be reduced. 2 cruisers fired on each other, each convinced the other had been taken. Then the human counterstrike rose. Earth had never built a fleet for interstellar war. So it built one from whatever was not nailed down. By evening, the sky was full of falling invaders. Some burned before impact. Some crashed into oceans. Some were caught by atmosphere and dragged down screaming in colors no sunset had ever worn. The black shapes that had blotted out the stars began to break apart. Othran survived the fall of Sovereign Glass. His escape vessel crashed in a forest, tearing a wound through ancient trees before burying itself in wet earth. He crawled out with cracked armor and dead rank lights, expecting soldiers, prisons, revenge, and the formal cruelty victorious species reserved for captured enemies. Instead, he found an old woman holding a shotgun. She stood beneath the rain, gray hair under a wool hat, boots sunk in mud. Behind her were a teenager with a radio, a man with an axe, and a little girl clutching a dog by the collar. The greatest living commander of the Dominion looked at them and understood why Earth had not fallen. There was no rear line. There were only people, and every person was a door the war could come through. The old woman did not kill him. She made him sit in the mud until soldiers arrived. The dog watched him as if it had personal objections to imperial doctrine. Weeks passed before the last Vaer vessel fled the system. Months passed before the fires were buried under rebuilding. Years would pass before Earth stopped finding pieces of the invasion in oceans, deserts, ice, and bone. The cost could not be polished into victory. Too many chairs were empty. Too many names had moved from mouths to memorials. Too many cities carried scars visible from orbit. But Earth remained Earth. The final Vaer report carried one sentence. Do not mistake human division for weakness. It is the storage method of their strength. Other worlds read the report in disbelief. Then the stories spread. They told of a planet that argued until the sky cracked, then stood together under fire. They told of cities that refused to become trophies, of children who carried messages, of cooks who poisoned supply lines, of musicians who hid codes in songs, of pilots who rammed metal gods, of doctors who treated enemies and stole secrets from their wounds, of engineers who turned weather, mirrors, roads, rivers, tunnels, jokes, and junk into weapons. They told of Earth as if it were a monster. They were wrong. Earth was not a monster. It was a home. The Vaer landed expecting conquest. They found memory. They found grief. They found love with dirt under its nails and blood on its teeth. A century later, a memorial opened on the coast where the first Vaer column had touched Earth. The glassed sand remained. Grass grew around it. Wildflowers pushed through cracks in the old runway. Children ran where siege walkers had fallen. Above them stood no statue of one leader. Instead, a wall of names curved with the shore. At sunset, ships from other worlds hovered beyond the clouds while survivors and descendants gathered below. The inscription at the entrance carried the words humanity had chosen for itself after the invasion. Not a threat. Not a boast. Just a warning born from everything the planet had endured. We are not hard to find. We are hard to own. And in the deep archives of a broken empire, beneath layers of shame and correction, the first report on Earth remained preserved with one word crossed out in red. Primitive. Under it, in the handwriting of Grand Marshal Othran Vel, written after years of captivity, study, and silence, there was a replacement no Ver scholar had dared to erase. Unconquerable.